Hello friends, welcome back to Faith and Arrow Homestead. My name is Jaylee and I am very excited to be introducing you to mine and Tom's new baby daughter, Macy June. Let me see if I can hold her up for you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look, such a sweet girl. She is a tiny little peanut. At birth, she weighed 5 pounds, 15 ounces. And we have been tracking her weight closely, so she had a follow-up weigh yesterday, and she was 5 pounds, 10 ounces. But she is definitely a little peanut. I'm not going to share the day she was born, her birthday. I do think that I'd like to keep it private. I've never actually shared my birthday on this channel either, so I'm just going to keep that private. But I wish I would have been able to film this sooner. She's actually 5 days old, so almost a week. But I'm a first-time mom and it has been an adjustment, and we were in the hospital for a little bit of extra time, so I'm just now getting around to doing it. But I took notes on my phone so I would be able to give you guys all the accurate information for the story, and that's what this video is. I want to share our birth story with you, and I preface it by saying that it was a wild ride. I never thought that I'm a first-time mom, and I never thought that I would be a quick laborer, a fast laborer. I just always assumed, the typical first-time mom experience, that I'd be in labor for a long time. Maybe I'd be in early labor for a couple days. I had hired a doula. Her name was Sabrina. And you'll hear her mentioned in the story, and I think she's in some of the clips too. The whole goal was to labor at home for as long as possible before going to the hospital, so that I didn't labor at the hospital for very long. I did that because I wanted to reduce the chance of intervention. I really, really wanted this to be as natural a birth experience as I could get. Boy, did it end up being that, but not in the way that I had expected. And so altogether, from start to finish, from my very first contraction, which I was smart enough to, in the middle of the night, put in my phone, I can tell you exactly when I had my very first contraction, all the way to her time of birth was 12 hours and 6 minutes. It was a very fast labor. And in fact, we sort of almost didn't make it to the hospital. I was pushing in the truck. So yeah, it was a wild experience, and I can't wait to share it with you. So I had my very first contraction at 11:50 p.m. I had gone to bed at 9:30. I got about 3 hours of sleep, and I woke up to my first contraction. And I knew, so I had been having Braxton Hicks since my second trimester, but this contraction woke me up, and I thought, oh, that was a labor contraction. I felt very sure of it. And so I put it in my phone, and I'm glad that I did. And after that, I had, my contractions were about 20 to 30 minutes apart, but not for very long, because I put the times in my phone for all of them. And I had a contraction at 1:03 a.m. and every contraction after that was 2 to 5 minutes apart. Like a switch flipped, and after that, things just started to go really quickly. So I got maybe another hour of sleep, probably 4 total, and then it was apparent to me that I was in full-blown labor. So I wasn't able to stay in the bed anymore. I got up, I moved to the living room, and I had a really nice few hours. The contractions were close together, but they weren't very long, anywhere from 35 to 50 seconds long, and they weren't very intense yet. And so I spent some time on the couch, and I did my Bible study, which was really wonderful. The Lord gave me a beautiful word that I highlighted, and I wrote the date and the time next to it so I can remember that I read that while I was in labor. And then I got up, I took a shower. I had a watermelon that I had bought that I wanted to have as a snack for while I was in labor, so I cut that up. I finished getting my hospital bag ready, and while I'm doing all of these things, I'm up, I'm walking around, and I'm still coping fine, but I am thinking to myself, okay, this is not subsiding, because I'm still thinking, oh, okay, like, I'm in early labor. I could be in early labor like this for the next day. I could still maybe not even deliver until tomorrow, maybe the next day. So that's what I'm thinking in my head, but nothing is subsiding. The contractions were not spacing out. They were not lessening in intensity. They were very steadily getting longer and harder to cope with, all throughout the morning while I'm up doing all of these things. So I want to mention, if you haven't heard any of my other pregnancy content up to this point, I was planning on utilizing something called the Bradley method. If you've never heard of the Bradley method, it's basically where you use breathing and relaxation to help you cope with the contractions. It's a book. I read the whole book twice, actually. And so at this point, it's around 6:45 to 7 a.m. The contractions are getting harder for me to cope with. So I started trying to use the Bradley method. There's a particular position that you're supposed to get in where one leg is, up and one arm is up and your neck is at a certain level, and it's supposed to be so that no body part is putting pressure on another body part so that you can focus on breathing and relaxing. And I know that it works for people. I've heard so many stories and I've read the book twice. It did not work for me. I could not relax. The thing that ruined it for me, the reason I couldn't, is because the contractions I couldn't breathe through them. Not in a panicky kind of way. I wasn't panicky, but I quite literally, while I was having one, I couldn't catch my breath. Like I couldn't, you're supposed to do like belly breathing. I couldn't get control of my breath well enough to actually control it. And so it wasn't relaxing to me because I was like, I can't breathe the way that they're telling me to. I can't control my breath at all. So that threw me for a loop and made it to where the Bradley method was totally ineffective. It was still worth having done the research and having read the book because it helped me in other places that I'll mention throughout the story, but the Bradley method was out. And that really stinks for me because I didn't have anything else I had nothing else. I had a labor comb, which is a comb that you squeeze in your hand and it's supposed to help with the contractions. That really did help. It didn't take away any of the pain, but it helped me distract from it, I guess, in the moment. So I really liked having the labor comb. So I basically just kind of was moving around the house trying to find some way to cope. I spent some time in the spare bedroom on my pregnancy ball on my knees, rolling against it. And that was nice, that worked. Then I would come into the bed and I would lay in the bed for a little bit and try to do some that way. I would stand in the kitchen and lean against the kitchen counter and try to get through some that way. So I was just like trying to find something, but it definitely was occurring to me that this was very quickly getting out of my control. Like I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to cope, didn't know how to get through the contractions. They were getting to the point where I was starting to be like, I need help. So I had texted my doula at 5:30 in the morning, 5:33 to be exact, and had said, hey, I'm definitely in labor for sure, but I'm still doing fine. I'm coping fine. I don't need you right now, but I'm just giving you a heads up. Then it was around 6:45, 7 that the contractions started to get a lot harder. And that's when I was telling you guys that I was walking around trying to find different positions to get in to make it easier. The Bradley method wasn't working for me. So I texted my doula at 7:09 a.m. and I'm going to read you verbatim what I said. I said, okay, I definitely thought I was going to make it longer, but if it's possible, I'm going to need you soon. Because mind you, I'm feeling very, bad, I guess, because I'm a first-time mom. I texted her at 5:30 that I was in labor. I've been in labor since 11:50 p.m. It's 7:09 and I'm like, nope, I need you. And I feel bad because I'm still at this point thinking I'm going to be in labor for the next 20 hours, 16 hours, I'm thinking there's no way it can't, I'm not dilating that much. I'm just having a hard time coping. So I feel bad being like, hey, I really need you to come. And she, I think, also kind of felt the same way because she questioned me pretty heavily for about an hour. We were texting back and forth and she was like, well, have you tried this position? Maybe try getting in the shower, or have you lost your mucus plug yet? And, I totally understood. I understood her questioning me, because I didn't want her to come and be here for 16 hours either, but I was answering her questions the best I could. But finally it got to the point where I was like, I I was panicking. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And like, I can't do this. So I texted her in response to one of her questions and I said, yep, I'm getting the epidural. That's what the text said. And she texted me back at 8:07 and she said, I'm on my way. I'm coming. And so she lives about 45 minutes away from here. So it was during that stretch of time, in the 45 minutes following her saying that she was on her way, which was at 8:07, that I started having something that I was calling clenching. During some of my contractions, not all of them, but some of them, my stomach would involuntarily like clench really painfully. Like when the best way that I could describe it is, and it's not exactly like this, but close, is when you are throwing up and you're at the end of throwing up and you're pretty much done, but your stomach is still involuntarily making you like heave and it's painful. Have you ever experienced that? It was sort of like that. And it hurt. It was very painful. So when Sabrina, my doula, got to me, one of the first things she asked me was, can you explain to me what you're experiencing? Because she could, like, as soon as she got here, she could tell I was in it. Like, I was not in beginning early labor. Like, I was in active labor. I was in the trenches of it when she got here. She was like, explain to me what you're experiencing. So I told her about the clenching, and I remember her being like kind of confused about it, like maybe by the way I explained it or the word that I used, that the word clenching. So she was like, okay, the next time that happens, why don't you let me feel your stomach while it's happening? So a couple contractions later, we did exactly that. I said, yep, it's happening. She put her hands on my stomach, and she was like, oh, you're pushing. And, it didn't dawn on me right away that that's what that was, like, because I kept calling it a clenching. It didn't dawn on me that that was pushing, because it started really high up my stomach. Like, it was higher up. And it felt like the throwing up sensation that I was telling you about, not throwing up, but that like involuntary, like your stomach like making you heave. But then by the time she got there and we were talking about it, I realized that sensation had actually moved lower, and I wasn't keeping up with it well enough to pick up on that. So when she felt it, it was actually really low in my stomach, and she called it pushing. She was like, oh, you're pushing. But I wasn't doing it on purpose. It was involuntary. It would happen during a contraction, and it was very, it was so terrible. But that's like, and I started making that noise while it was happening, like, and she was like, you're pushing. And I was like, I don't mean to. So then she was like, okay, well, I was laying down at the time. So she was like, let's get you up. So we went into the kitchen and we were standing around the counter. And actually, it's just so funny to look back on this, because that was nice. Like, we were talking, we were laughing. I really like Sabrina, so we were like catching up a little bit in between contractions, which were still like 2 to 3 minutes apart. And I remember we ate cookies. We were eating cookies that I had made the day before, hanging out in the kitchen. But standing started to get really difficult. I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep. I was getting really tired really fast, and I didn't want to stand anymore. So we went and kneeled. I wanted to be kneeling. I didn't want to sit because I didn't want any pressure. Sitting was not working. Laying down wasn't really doing anything for me. Standing was becoming difficult. So to me, the only other option was to kneel. So I knelt down in front of my couch, facing my couch, and the rest of the laboring that I did at home, which was like 20 minutes maybe, happened there in front of the couch. The clenching that I had been explaining, she told me it was pushing. I was still trying to process that, but once I knelt down in front of the couch, it became very apparent to me that she was exactly right. My body was making me involuntarily push, and it startled me. So she was like, okay, let's give it a couple more contractions, and if it happens again, maybe we should go to the hospital. So just as she said, a couple of contractions go by and I have a really big one, and it scared me because it was like very evident to me that it was me not being able to control the sensation of pushing. And I pushed hard, and I was very vocal, and I was like grunting and kind of like not yelling, but just loud, and I didn't mean to be, like, it was just happening. And so it scared me because it all felt very out of control for me. So after that contraction ended, I lifted my head, and mind you, I wasn't really talking anymore at this point. I lifted my head and I looked at her and I said, we have to go right now. And luckily Tom, who had been listening and kind of watching all of this, had already started getting all of our stuff together and getting everything in the truck. And I'm so grateful because I was able to literally just put my flip-flops on and walk out to the truck. And my contractions are so close together. In the time that it took me to stand up, put my flip-flops on, and walk to the truck, I'm having another contraction. They're coming so quick and they're so intense. And then so we get in the truck and we head to the hospital. We only live like 15 minutes away from the hospital. Can I tell you that that truck ride was the worst, the worst. I had 4 contractions while we were in the truck on the way there, and 2 of them were pushing contractions. So I'm in the truck, Tom is doing his absolute best, and I'm like kind of yelling at this point because the pushing is just like really intense. And I can't help it, I can't stop it, and I don't want to be doing it. So it's like, it's the involuntary sensation, me kind of fighting it, and then just the vocalization that I'm involuntarily doing while it's happening. It was all just it was a lot. And then of course every bump, every sharp turn, you're like, it's like razor blades. So agonizing. That was terrible. So then we get to the hospital. Sabrina meets us in the front, gets a wheelchair. As soon as I stand up from being in the truck, I'm hanging on to Tom for dear life, having another contraction. They get me in the wheelchair. Sabrina's running me to labor and delivery while Tom parks the truck. We get to labor and delivery and I am just completely in baby land. My eyes were closed and I was fighting for my life. So we get up to the triage desk and Sabrina is trying to explain to them. I can hear her. She's trying to convince them because I'm a first-time mom. She's like, yeah, she's been in labor since about midnight. She's a first-time mom. She said, but I really, really think she's close. And I can hear her trying to convince them. And it worked out perfectly, praise God, because while we're there and she's doing that, I have another contraction and I must have made just the right noise or had like just the right tone when I did it because I was vocalizing, because they were like, get her in a room right now. And so they immediately wheel me into a room and they're like, okay, get her underwear off and get her in the bed. And so I climb out of the wheelchair Sabrina helps me take my underwear off. I get into the bed and the position that I just naturally climb into is pretty much the position that I had when I was in front of the couch. I'm facing the back of the bed on my knees with my legs out behind me, and the bed is up in maybe like a 45-degree angle, not quite a 90. So this position is actually, I stayed in it for the rest of the time. That is the position that I delivered in. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I absolutely loved delivering in that position, and I literally cannot fathom delivering any other way. Like, I don't know what other position I would have I can't picture anything else. Like, it was perfect. It was the best position. Once I'm in the bed and I'm in position, I'm just like going to town. I'm rocking back and forth during the contractions, or I'm swaying my hips back and forth during the contractions. And I can hear that there's a bunch of people in there. My eyes are closed. I hear Tom come in, but I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just focusing on getting through my contractions, which are very close together. And I hear somebody say, I'm going to check you. You don't have to move. You can stay exactly where you are, which was good because I wasn't moving. And so she checks me and she goes, oh, fully dilated. I can feel the head. It's Sabrina. She's like, did you hear that? She's right there. She can feel the head. And I was like, yeah, me too. Which was such a relief because obviously I knew things had progressed because of the pushing. But you never know, right? Like it would have been dreadful for them to say, oh, well, you're only 4 centimeters, are you interested in an epidural? Like, blah, blah, blah. There was none of that. She checked me and she was like, it's go time, baby. Like, the head is right here. The nurses and everybody are still doing their thing, getting everything set up and everything ready. And I remember somebody asked me, they said, can I have your hand so I can start an IV? And I said, I didn't respond right away. And then I said, do you mind if we hold off on that for right now? And she said, I loved this hospital so much. She goes, yeah, honey, you can decline anything that you want to decline. And nobody asked me again, the rest of the entire time I was in the hospital, nobody asked me if they could start an IV on me. So that was really such a blessing because I had a whole list of things that I really wanted and hoped would happen, but I was hanging on to everything so loosely, and not getting an IV was one of them. I am a really easy stick, and I used to work on the stroke team at a local hospital back when I was still in healthcare, and I've seen nurses throw in IVs in 2.5 seconds. So I was not to say that there aren't situations where somebody should have an IV just in case. I didn't think I needed to be one of those people. I'm an easy stick. Somebody would be able to get an IV started on me real fast if I needed one. So for those reasons, I had it in my head that I didn't want an IV just because I thought it was going to annoy me. I hate hand IVs, and I hate having to not being able to bend your arm when they're in the bend of your arm. And I didn't want anything to detract from just me focusing on laboring. So that was such a blessing that she just accepted that and didn't give me any pushback, and I never did get an IV. And actually there are several things where I could say that same thing. Like, they were just so casual and so low pressure. Nobody even asked me to change into the hospital gown. I delivered in the sundress that I was wearing. I was just wearing like a plain black, like strapped sundress. And that's what I delivered in. Like, nobody asked me to put on a gown or anything. So it was actually a very, how can I say this? It felt like as much of a home birth as you could get without it being a home birth. I feel like I didn't get an IV. Nobody tried. I was drinking my own water and eating my own snacks the whole time. I didn't, I delivered in my sundress. I labored at home pretty much the entire time. You know, it felt very much like a home birth, but ending at the hospital. Okay. So at this point, I realized that this thing is moving along because I can feel her. And that's something else that I am so grateful that I got to experience. I could literally feel my baby moving down the birthing canal. At this point, all of my contractions are pushing contractions. Every single one of them gave me a very powerful, well, this is interesting. It's almost a little difficult to explain. When I say a pushing contraction, my body, every time I had what I'm calling a pushing contraction, my body was involuntarily pushing for me. However, I quickly realized once I was at the hospital and I had the midwife looking, they were like, you can push with these contractions, because I wasn't adding anything to it. I was just letting my body do what it was doing, which was like that clenching feeling I was describing, but I wasn't leaning into that. I was just getting through it. So it was at this point, once everybody was in there and everything was settled and I was on the bed and ready, they were like, you need to push with these contractions. So I started doing that. I started like really pushing with them. And it was once I lasered in and started focusing on that, that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I can feel her moving, descending, coming down. It was a really incredible feeling. It was uncomfortable and very intense, but these contractions that I'm describing to you now, I actually would not have called them painful. It's so interesting in labor and delivery how you would describe pain. They were very intense, but these contractions, from when I started voluntarily pushing with the involuntary sensation, and I could feel her descending, intense and uncomfortable, but I don't think I'd call them painful. So, okay, at this point, I can feel that it's almost time for her to be born based on where I'm feeling her. And this is when I would change the way that I describe it. Now, before I start talking about this, if you are a first-time mom and you want to deliver naturally, you have two choices here. You can either skip ahead. I'd skip ahead maybe a couple of minutes in this video. Or if you want the truth, then you can listen. But I don't want it to scare anybody. I don't want to discourage anybody, because I would not change it. And I'm glad that I had the experience that I had. I don't know that I would have wanted to hear this before I had her. So I just wanted to put in that disclaimer. If you are about to deliver your first baby and you want to do it naturally, proceed with caution with what the next bit of this that I'm going to talk about. I can feel at this point that she is close to exiting. And looking back on it, it was absolutely incredible. An incredible experience. And I'm so glad that it's over and that I can look back on it and remember that feeling, and remember just how powerful and intense and amazing it was to feel that she's ready to be born. Like, it was, gosh, there's no words for that. It's absolutely incredible. However, this is when it went from, yeah, very intense but uncomfortable, to excruciating. The worst pain I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like, I can't even really properly verbalize to you just how absolutely horrendously painful it was. Yeah. So at this point, it's no longer her descending, it's her exiting. And every contraction that I pushed with was blindingly painful. You hear people talk about the ring of fire, and boy, it is so real. Blinding red hot fire. And it made it very difficult, obviously, but it made it difficult because once I had experienced a couple of those contractions, and realized, oh, this is gonna hurt, it made it very difficult for me to choose to push, because I didn't have to. My body was still doing it for me. Like, I was still pushing every contraction whether I wanted to or not. I had to make the choice to push into the pain. And I tried not, and I wasn't making any progress. Like, I could feel that it still hurt. It was still excruciating, and I wasn't making any progress. I had to push with the contraction to really feel that progress, to feel her getting closer to being born. And that was difficult. And I was praying out loud, which is funny because you hear reels and you see people do that, like, on the internet. That was real. I was like, I don't think I was being particularly loud. I felt like I was muttering. Maybe I wasn't, but I was like, please, Jesus, please, God, please help me, please help me. And I really was praying because it felt so impossible in the moment. Like, it was just so incredibly painful that it was like, how am I going to do this? He was with me, because every contraction that I had, I somehow found the courage to do it, to push with it. And it took probably, I don't know this for sure, I'm just trying to look back on it and remember, probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 of these contractions of me choosing to push with the pain before she was born. And let me tell you, I never thought I was going to be a vocal birther, because I hear, I've read all about it, like, screaming doesn't help. Like, it's not doing anything to make it easier. It's not taking any of the pain away. And so I always thought, naively, and I always thought, that's so stupid. Like, why waste your time and energy screaming when it's not doing anything for you? There was no other choice. During these contractions, when she was exiting, I was screaming. When I tell you, my voice was hoarse the whole rest of the day. I was screaming, and it wasn't even like I was choosing to do it. Like, there was no other way. Like, I was for sure going to scream through it. But it's also true what they say, that as soon as the baby's born, the relief is instant. The pain was just completely gone. But I was in complete and utter shock. It was so much more painful than I could have ever even thought to imagine, that I was literally like, after it was done and she was out, I was like, am I alive? Like, I was completely bewildered. Like, did I survive? Am I alive right now? I mean, just absolutely bewilderingly painful. My mom actually filmed the whole thing, the entire process of her being born, because, like I said, it took probably 5, 6, 7 contractions, somewhere in there. And I was not pushing outside of contractions. And actually, just a quick sidebar here, that is something that I'm so grateful that I researched the Bradley method, even though it didn't really help me labor. It did help me make a few choices, and that was one of them. I learned that it's actually not productive to push outside of contractions, but these hospitals tell you to do it because, I don't know, it makes it faster. I'm not exactly sure why, but and no discredit to any of the wonderful people who helped me have my baby. I had a great group of people in that room, and I'm so grateful to all of them. But that is one thing that they were doing. They kept saying, you can push, and Sabrina leaned in and she was like, are you only wanting to push with contractions? And I shook my head. She was like, that's okay, honey, you can do that. And so I did. That's what I did. I waited until I had a contraction to push, and I'm so glad, because you have all of that power behind you, it really doesn't make any sense to push without that power, without your uterus working with you. So I'm grateful to the Bradley method for giving me that. But because of that, the video is, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 minutes long, because I waited to push with contractions, and they were probably 2 minutes, minute and a half apart, somewhere around there. But anyway, yes, so my mom filmed it. Of course, I'm not going to put the whole unedited thing on the internet. That would be way too personal. But I do want to put just like a little clip here, because when I watched that video back, I was cracking up, because I look just as bewildered as I felt. I'm like looking around like, what just happened? And it's funny, because the reason that got filmed is because I asked Tom, Mom, and Sabrina. I was like, somebody needs to film this, because I want to have the moment that they hand me my child on camera. And I thought it was going to be this romantic, like, give me my baby, my sweet child. I love her. I'm so excited. I was like, am I alive? Like, I was just totally bewildered. And so if I can find a way to blur everybody out and make sure that there's nothing inappropriate, I want to put that on the screen, because it's hysterical. Yeah, it wasn't the romantic moment that I thought it was going to be, but still really wonderful. And I was still so happy to look down and see my baby. Oh, it was amazing, but just not what I thought it was going to be. So yeah, from first contraction to her being born was 12 hours and 6 minutes. I delivered within an hour and 15 minutes of arriving at the hospital. And like I said, I never thought that I'd be a fast laborer. It was startling and unsettling how quickly my labor progressed. I mean, so fast. And I'm so grateful that I had my doula, because I really think I would have been very confused if I didn't have her to offer me guidance, because I did not ever think that I would be a fast laborer. Never crossed my mind. Just assumed it was going to be a long, drawn out process. I appreciated having her encouragement, because I really thought that I just wasn't doing a good job. Like, it had gotten so hard when I was still at home getting through the contractions, that I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I've been in labor for 4 hours, and already I can't do this. It was very discouraging for me for a little bit. So to have her be like, you're progressing very quickly, and you're doing great. Look at what you're doing. You're doing it. So to have that encouragement from her was invaluable, and I'm so grateful. Oh, it's so sweet to say, Mom, stop talking. I'm trying to nap here. Yeah. I love this child so much. I wish yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Okay. So that's my labor story, but there is one more thing that I want to talk about quickly before we pivot onto some other things, and that is I want to talk about how clever God is, because big stretch. I had prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed about this labor and delivery process. And, I in my prayers, I told God, what it is I was hoping for. And I had my hands opened, and I surrendered the experience to him, and I kept saying, even if this doesn't go anything like what I want it to, I know that you've got a reason, and your plans are for good, all of that. But I still, even though I pray like that, and I do surrender, I still go to him and I say, but from my limited perspective, this is what I'm hoping happens. And I give you these things, and I lay them down at your feet, and I trust you. I trust that you know me, and that that it's going to turn out the way that you meant for it to go for me. Does that make sense? Because I am definitely of the belief, and have seen it time and time again, that God knows us so much better than we know ourselves. So much better. You may think you want something, and God's like, but I know your heart. And I know the outcome of that. And I know that actually you wouldn't like that, or that you'd like this other thing. And so it really is so helpful in a faith journey, in a trust journey, to have experienced that, to be able to stand back and be like, wow, my God knows me. And so I say all of that to say he was so clever in the way that this turned out, because I got everything I wanted in this labor and delivery. Everything I had asked for, I got. And if he had left it up to me to accomplish those things, I would not have. I had already caved. I had caved at 8:09 when I texted my doula and said, I'm getting the epidural. I was going to cave so fast on so many things. And the circumstances worked out where I couldn't. I couldn't if I wanted to. When we got to the hospital, it was go time. There was no time for epidural. I was fully dilated, fully effaced. She could feel her head. Like there was no epidural. If that had been left up to me, there probably would have been an epidural. Like, let's be real. And so I just am so grateful to the Lord that not only did he give me everything I wanted, but he gave me a set of circumstances in which I could not screw it up. Like, I couldn't have screwed that up. I was just along for the ride. And he painted such a beautiful picture and gave me such a beautiful story, made up of all of the little desires of my heart that I had laid down at his feet, in the midst of difficulty, with how difficult labor and delivery is. I would not have been strong enough. And that's the thing, right? We're not strong enough. And so I'm so grateful to have the guidance and the architect behind me on this whole thing. And it was just so wonderful and so beautiful. And even though it was hard, I wouldn't have changed anything about it. It was so wonderful. It was such a wonderful experience, a labor and delivery experience. And although I am not soon going to forget how hard it was, everybody says that you forget. I don't know how I could possibly forget that. I don't know how I could possibly forget that. Yeah. I would do it again. I would do it again. I would do it again even just to have you, because I love you so much and you're so perfect. You are so perfect. I just remembered actually one more thing before we move on from how God crafted this beautiful plan for me. This all happened on the day that I was scheduled to have a membrane sweep and a follow-up ultrasound to talk about induction. The day that I delivered, I was 39 weeks, 4 days, and I had already been really pushing my luck. They didn't want me to go to 39 weeks. And so we were going to do the membrane sweep, and I had this ultrasound scheduled. And at this ultrasound, I knew that they were going to really insist that I schedule an induction. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to do either of those things. I didn't even want to do the membrane sweep. And I had those appointments were at 1:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon. And that day I delivered her at 11:56 a.m. So, never made it to any of those appointments. And that's just, guys, that's amazing. I'm a first-time mom who went into labor on my own at 39 weeks, 4 days, and had her before those appointments. Like, I didn't even make it to 1:30. So that, I just praise God. I'm so grateful and so abundantly blessed by that. That's amazing. So sorry, just glory to God. Had to give him credit because that is freaking cool. So yeah, she was born weighing 5 pounds, 15 ounces. I had a fetal growth restriction for most of the pregnancy, so we knew she was going to be small. But she was absolutely perfect, other than just being on the small side. They did track her weight and her bilirubin really closely, and her blood sugar. So they came and they poked her little heel so many times while we were there. And they made us stay 48 hours. And then after we were discharged, they had us come back the next day to do follow-up blood work and a follow-up weight. Now I'm going to talk for a minute about breastfeeding, and that'll probably be the last thing that I talk about in this video because it's going to be long enough with the birth story. But I had absolutely dreamed and dreamed of exclusively breastfeeding. I want to breastfeed so bad. And so we immediately tried to get her to latch, and within the hour she had latched and was feeding. The lactation consultant said that she didn't have any lip or tongue ties, and that we should be able to breastfeed no problem. And that first feed went really, really well. She latched well and ate for a while. She had already peed, she had already had a bowel movement, everything was looking great. But because, labor's hard on the babies too, and she was so little, she was very sleepy and very groggy for the first 48, even a little longer than that, because it was also, I'd say the first 72 hours, she was very sleepy. And so when that happens, it's hard to feed them because it's hard to get them to wake up to eat. And that was very stressful for me. And it didn't help that in the hospital, and again, I don't fault them for this, but they were hounding me about feeding her. And they were like, she has to be eating 12 times a day. She maybe was eating 5 times a day. And I'm like panicking, thinking I'm failing, like I'm not doing a good enough job. And I'm trying my absolute best to get her to eat. She was just really sleepy. And so that first night that we were home, I absolutely spiraled. I was bawling my eyes out. I was like, and you know how the hormones are. So I was just like irrational. I was like, she's going to be dehydrated. We're going to have to go to the ER. Like I was panicking, thinking that she wasn't eating enough. And that night, I did everything I could to try to get her to eat. Every tip and trick that every friend I texted gave me. The only thing that worked was getting her naked and putting like a cold washcloth on her. That would wake her up enough to get her to latch to eat a little bit. I was killing myself trying to get this kid to eat. And so we went to the hospital the next day to have her weighed after I had put in all of this work trying to get her to eat. And I was so nervous. I was like, what if they admit her again? What if they try to give her formula while we're here? Like, I was so worried. And we get there, they put her on the scale, and they were like, yep, she gained, what was it? She had gained almost a full ounce. Yeah, because she went from 7 and some change, 5 pounds, 7 ounces and some change, to 7 pounds, 8 ounces and some change. So she had gained almost an ounce. And the nurse turns around and looks at me, and she goes, good job, Mama, that's a well-fed baby. And I burst into sobbing tears. I was uncontrollably sobbing. And I looked at her and I said, there are no nicer words on this planet that you could have said to me right now than those. Because when you're breastfeeding and you're solely responsible for the nourishment and the thriving of a child, it's a lot of pressure. And, I know that breastfeeding is hard. You hear everybody say that, but you can't understand it until you're really in it. Wow, is it hard. Luckily, though, after that, so 48, 72. So really yesterday, I guess. Yesterday, was probably the first day where I felt like we really got the hang of it. Like she was eating really regularly, easily latching. I wasn't having to really work for it. She was having really regular diapers, and it just has gotten smoother since. Today's been equally easy. And we also had a pediatric appointment with our pediatrician, and she had gained even more at that one. So we're doing it. We're getting there. Boy, is it hard though. Breastfeeding is not for the weak, not for the faint of heart, but we're doing it, aren't we? Are you sleeping? Are you napping? Huh? Are you napping? What a sweet girl. What a sweet girl. Huh? Yeah. Are you so sweet? Hmm? Are you so pretty and so sweet? Huh? And then the very last thing that we're going to talk about is just how much I love her. You guys, it is crazy how much I love this child. The hormones are really something else. And so I'll just be sitting looking at her just like this. and I'll just be sobbing because I love her so much. I love her so much. And she's 5 days old now, and I still just look at her, and I'll look at Tom and I'll be like, dude, we have a baby, and she's perfect. I'm still just like absolutely in shock. And I texted my mom and I was like, this isn't my niece. This isn't my friend's kid. Like, this is my baby. This is my baby. Mwah. Did I scare you? Did I startle you? I'm so sorry. And then lastly, I have to give so much credit to Tom. And I probably actually should have done this sooner in the video, but I guess we'll save the best for last. He is doing incredible, you guys, because I'm a first-time mom. He's a first-time dad. And he did great while I was laboring. He did great while I was delivering. He did great while we were in the hospital. He's doing great here at the house. He's been so supportive, always asking me, what can I do? What do you need? Trying to take initiative. He'll take her, no problem. He's been trying to encourage me. He's like, you know, if you want to pump and get some bottles, I can feed her. You don't have to get up, you know, all throughout the night. So he's just trying to find ways to make things easier for me, and he's been really wonderful. And isn't it such a joy to watch the men that we love become fathers? It is such a joy. And it really makes you look at your spouse differently. And I've loved watching him be a dad. And I'm so grateful that he's been so supportive to me. And he's just been wonderful. Yeah, you've got the best daddy. So, sorry, I'm sure that this is super long, but I always say these videos are just as much for me as they are for you. So I'm really glad to have this that I can look back on. And I hope you enjoyed watching it. And if you are about to have a baby, I'll say a prayer for you. And I hope it goes smoothly. I hope it's wonderful. And remember that even if it isn't what you think you want, God has a plan for us, and his plans are for good. And we just have to trust. We just have to trust him. So God be with you. And thank you for watching. Yeah. Thank you for watching. As I've said in previous videos, she will never be the primary focus of my content. This is not a parenting channel. And so the content's never going to be focused on her, but you will see her. She'll be around. She'll be in my wrap. As she gets older, you'll see her in the background. You'll hear her. I'm not going to, blur her or really go out of my way to keep her from being on the channel. You're never, ever going to see her in any sort of state of undress, ever. I'm never going to share any sort of medical decisions, treatments, vaccination status, anything like that. I think that's her personal medical information and is not for me to share. But she'll be around. And for those of you who have been praying all this time, thank you so much, because the Lord has heard our collective prayers. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you. So I can't wait to see you in my next video. Have faith, my friends, and keep moving forward. Bye.